US President Donald Trump has threatened to hit buyers of Russian oil with tariffs. The off-the-cuff proposal follows his criticism of the presidents of Ukraine and Russia, as efforts to kickstart ceasefire talks remain deadlocked. Trump first criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin for questioning the credibility of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, followed by the Ukrainian leader for not agreeing to a rare earths deal.
I was disappointed in a certain way with some of the things that were said over the last day or two having to do with Zelenskyy, because when he considers Zelenskyy not credible, he's supposed to be making a deal with him, whether you like him or you don't like him. So I wasn't happy with that. And I think Zelenskyy, by the way, I see he's trying to back out of the rare earth deal. And if he does that, he's got some problems, big problems. We made a deal on rare earth, and now he's saying, well, you know, I want to renegotiate the deal. He wants to be a member of NATO. Well, he was never going to be a member of NATO. He understands that. So if he's looking to renegotiate the deal, he's got big problems.
The ability to end the war in Ukraine has long been a claim of the US president. Although diplomacy is now functioning, Mr. Trump says he is angry at Putin. He threatened secondary tariffs of 25% to 50% on buyers of Russian oil if he feels Moscow is blocking his efforts. The Kremlin says President Putin remains open to contact with Mr. Trump. And for more, Caroline Malone joins us live now from Washington. Now, Caroline, just how likely is it that Trump would proceed with these tariffs on Russian oil if a ceasefire isn't reached?
Well, we can certainly see at this point that President Trump is expressing frustration, really, that this deal hasn't been done. We know during his campaigning in last year before the election, he was talking about ending this war within one day. Clearly, that hasn't happened. It's also looking like it'll be unlikely to even get to a full ceasefire within 100 days of his presidency. So this is what we're hearing here, I believe, the frustration that he feels that this war hasn't been ended yet, because it puts a lot of pressure on the United States. The United States essentially giving Ukraine billions of dollars worth of aid, including in weapons. And that's something that President Trump ultimately wants to stop. But this idea of introducing tariffs on Russia is an interesting one, and not one that we've heard before. We know, of course, President Trump favors tariffs. That is a tool that he has chosen to use, that he's threatened to use. He's already introduced some duties last month, particularly on China. We're due this week on Wednesday to have a wide range of other tariffs introduced on other countries, which was originally seen as a type of bargaining tool that the White House was using to try and get other countries to agree on deals the US wants. But it seems now that President Trump and his team are willing to enforce those tariffs. So we're at the point now where those tariffs have come into play. The question really is, though, with regard to this idea of Russian tariffs, how that might work. There's already wide-ranging sanctions on Russia, on Russian exports from the US and other European countries. If the US wanted to introduce tariffs on Russian oil, that could potentially impact the kinds of countries that buy Russian oil. So we're talking about China and India in the majority. Of course, the US already does a lot of deals with China and India. So how you'd actually work out how to introduce duties onto those types of exports and imports could be rather complicated. But clearly, we are seeing here Trump's willingness to look at an economic duty to try and get Russia to agree to a deal.
Now, Caroline, Trump's comments mark a shift in his tone towards Putin and Russia. What is the significance of this shift?
Absolutely. It's a really big change in tone. We've, more often heard President Trump, particularly when he comes off calls with President Putin, talking about how they have a good relationship, how he's a smart guy, how he, seems to, some analysts say, basically repeat a lot of what President Putin would have been saying on the call, very much repeating the Russian line, and also criticizing Ukraine, which clearly is a very big change in direction from how previous US presidents used to speak and used to favour Ukraine much more than Russia. So this change in tone in the other direction, so speaking, unfavourably really about President Putin, saying that he's got to come to the deal here, he's not happy with him for these statements that he's made on Friday, that really is a change in tone. And we might read into this some of the events of the last few days, which include that President Trump met with the Finnish president. And that was an opportunity from the Finnish side for the president to say to Trump that there has to be a deadline for this ceasefire. There can't be a continuous delay between Russia and Ukraine, but particularly from the Russian side, to get to a ceasefire deal. The European perspective very much that Russia is delaying for its own good and not agreeing on a ceasefire. So potentially Trump listening to that and expressing this frustration here.
Caroline, thanks for that update. That was Caroline Malone live in Washington, D.C.